Hey, what's up guys? It's Rick with the Digital Divide, and today we're going to go on another thrifting adventure. That's right, this is episode 4 of the Thrift series, where I go to thrift stores and yard sales and flea markets and see what kind of fun things I can find. This is what I've collected over the last 2 weeks or so. So today we're going to start off at Fayetteville Antique Mall, and when we walk inside, the first thing I'm greeted with is a wall of 8-bit Nintendo cartridges, which makes me very happy because this is exactly the kind of thing that I'm looking for. So it looks like they've got PlayStation 4, they've got some Super Nintendo, I saw Super Mario 3 there, and then they've got a bunch of comic books, and I did end up sifting through everything here. They've got some toys as well, which, again, right up my alley. I ended up picking up Iron Man number 145, which is the first team appearance of the Raiders, and I also picked up a copy of Alpha Flight number 11, which is the first team appearance of Omega Flight, the first full appearance of Jerome Jackson and the origin of Sasquatch. I also picked up Iron Man number 155, which is the first appearance of the Mauler, and Fantastic Four number 254, which is the first appearance of Mantracora. I also picked up the Mighty Thor number 18, which is the first cameo appearance of Lady Loki, in addition to the Fantastic Four number 310, which is the first appearance of She-Thing. And then I also picked up West Coast Avengers number 10, which is the first appearance of Headlock, and then the Mighty Thor number 384, which is the first appearance of Dargo Couture. So a bunch of minor Marvel keys. I also picked up a copy of Planet of Terror. This is a really great book by Basil Wolverton, and the artwork is incredible. You don't find these often in the wild. This was a one-off, so there was only one issue ever released. I also picked up a couple of Spider-Man books from the 90s because I'm looking to complete that run. So moving on, I found some old antique Disney and war memorabilia, some Western stuff here, just not something I'm really interested. I did find this Spider-Man and Black Panther book, but it wasn't worth much. Moving on, I found this electronic chessboard and then a full steering wheel and pedal set for the original PlayStation. That was tempting, but the price was a bit much for what they were asking. Moving on, I found a Pikachu. That's always fun. And I found some weird comics I've never heard of called Thunder Agents by JC Comics. Not something I'm familiar with and not something that I'm interested in collecting either. And then I found this amazing taxidermied raccoon. I don't know why I always find taxidermied animals when I go out, but I just do. And next I found some Barbie dolls, and then I found what appeared to be a really cool sword at face value, but at closer inspection, it's a really cheap Chinese-made sword. It doesn't even have a full tang on the steel. It's not sharpened. It's just really cheap. So I'm going to skip on that. Moving on, I'm going to Cartridges Galore. Now, these guys are different than GameStop in that they only sell used second-hand stuff, like the Sega Saturn here for 150 bucks. They've got a lot of old stuff like this 3DO, and then a Jaguar CD for $1,200. I had no idea that this system was worth that much in the box these days, but this chain, I think it's local to the East Coast, but all they sell is used stuff. They don't sell any new stuff. It's all secondhand, and it's all focused primarily on retro gaming. This Sega Saturn Retrobit controller at $15 is an absolute steal because on Amazon it's like 25 bucks at least. And then they have a boxed Sega Genesis, and they did have a few Saturn games, but they were sports games, which no one's interested in. They did have a loose copy of Sega Rally, so I grabbed that, even though I already own it. I'm just gonna put it in storage because it's a great price. They also had some Dreamcast games as well, and a bunch of boxed Genesis and some Super Nintendo stuff. They had this Tasmania. They had a few copies of Tasmania for the Genesis in the box. I remember playing that as a kid. So what I ended up getting here was the original Xbox Duke controller, and I also picked up a copy of Wave Race for $12.37, which is a great price. The next stop is Goodwill, and when you walk in, to the left is where they normally have all the retro gaming stuff. So taking a look here, I found a few things, but not a lot. I found a copy of Juiced for the PlayStation 2, which actually is a really great racing game, but sadly, when I opened up the case, it was not juiced. There was a game in there, but it was not juiced. It was a different game. And then I saw Medal of Honor, which I already have, and then the rest of it is just a bunch of sports games. Moving on to another shelf, I found the Simpsons box set, and then I found Sims for the PlayStation 2, which might have been worth picking up, except it was empty. There was no game in there, so obviously I did not get that. Moving on, I found a boxed copy of Pro Fishing Hooked again for the Wii that came with the fishing controller adapter. And then I found these controllers, which initially I thought were original Sony PlayStation controllers. I was going to buy them, but then I looked at the connector and I realized that this is for the PlayStation Classic. So it's weird that the controllers were there, but not the system. Moving on, I found a factory-sealed copy of Angry Birds Star Wars for the Wii, so I picked that up. I also found a Wii Fit in the box, unopened, but these are a dime a dozen. I have a Wii Fit board already. I did find a copy of Star Ocean for the PlayStation 2, which I picked up as well, and then some other random games. On my way out, I found this giant pirate bird, which made me very happy. I don't know why. Next stop is Schreier's Market. This is an antique shop. I didn't find much here, but there were these really cool autographed NFL helmets. This one in particular by Ray Lewis. I'm in Maryland, so Baltimore is less than an hour away from me. That was cool to see. And then I found this bunny skates. I don't know why his eyes are red, but this is terrifying and it will haunt me for the rest of my life. I also found this cool Star Wars set and some random cars. Now, I do on occasion collect these die-cast metal cars if they're interesting to me, but I don't actively seek them out. If I find one that's super cheap, I'll pick it up. I did start collecting those. And then I found some weird, like, African artwork and some older antique memorabilia, some Time magazine, some creepy heads here. And then I found this Eminem guy with a trumpet. I don't know why I find those all the time. Next, I found this replica Colt pistol, and this I regret not getting. It doesn't fire, but God, it's beautiful, and it's made of all the right materials. And then I found a taxidermied deer head because, of course, I would. Now, moving on to our final destination, this one I went to today. This is the Plaza Flea Market in Baltimore, Maryland. I was meeting up some people to have lunch, and I figured I'd stop by. I found a vendor who was selling a bunch of sunglasses, and then I found this booth, and this guy had a ton of retro video gaming stuff, and this made me super happy, because this is exactly what I'm looking for. He had a bunch of PlayStation 2 stuff, Xbox 360, Wii. Now, a lot of this was overpriced. He had some Nintendo 64 stuff, Wave Race for $30, which I literally bought the week before for $12. So Double Dragon here for the NES, which I already have. Now, I saw Mega Man 2, and this came in the original Nintendo sleeve, and this one was super tempting. Didn't end up getting it, though, because it's more than it goes for on eBay, so why would I pay more money when I don't have to? He had a copy of Double Dragon as well, which, again, I already have. He did have a couple consoles, although not the ones I was looking for. He had a PlayStation, he had some Wiis, he had a Super Nintendo, a Wii U, an Xbox, but I was looking for a Dreamcast or a Game Boy Advance, and he didn't have either of those, but he did have a variety. He did have the original PlayStation 2, which is backwards compatible, but I already have that. And then in this case, he had some controllers and some other Nintendo DS systems and whatnot. Moving on to the next booth, this guy had a bunch of anime-themed figures, some in the box and some loose. I don't collect it, but it's cool to see. So I didn't find a lot outside, and I decided to move indoors, and wow, I was overwhelmed. There's so much inside. What initially caught my eye was this R2-D2 to scale figure, but then I realized that all it does is blow bubbles. To give you an idea, this is just one room, and there are several rooms. There's so much here and so many vendors. The first vendor I stopped by had a bunch of old toys, but a lot of these toys were just loose, and they were all very modern. Like, all of these are from Five Below, and they were overpriced and just not worth anything. So I didn't end up getting anything here, although they had a couple cool things. They had this R2-D2 plush that moves around, apparently, because it has some wheels at the bottom. But again, I didn't end up getting anything here because it's all modern stuff and it's all loose, out of the box for the most part. This Skeletor was kind of neat, but it's a new version of him and not the one I grew up with in the 80s. There were some Batman toys here, but again, these are modern. I did see these Star Trek ornaments, and I was really excited when I saw these, but when I asked how much they were, the girl told me that she was just watching the booth from her friend and that she was going to be back in 20 minutes, and I didn't feel like waiting, so I left. But they had like Voyager ships and, you know, the Klingon bird of prey and some other stuff that was really cool. Next booth I stopped by had a ton of Dragon Ball Z stuff, and I don't watch the show. I'm not a follower of the show, but I can respect it. It looks cool. Moving on, I found a bunch of pop figures. I don't actively seek these out, but when I find one that speaks to me, I will pick it up. I've been known to pick these up while thrifting all the time, so I do have several of them. Stan Lee and Spider-Man, Batman, that sort of thing. So moving on, this guy had a pile of PlayStation 5s as well as some custom Xbox controllers and a bunch of Halo figures, which was kind of cool to see. The next booth had a bunch of fake jewelry, and then I saw piles of comic books, but unfortunately these were all very common 90s Spider-Man comics and other stuff. The next booth I went to had a bunch of really cool video game systems. This blue Xbox caught my attention, as well as this yellow transparent N64 controller. I wanted it so bad, but not for $60, so I passed on that. He did have a bunch of Nintendo 64 cartridges that were loose, but again, he was charging way more than he should have been for these, so I didn't get those. He had some Sega Saturn games. He was asking $30 for Scorcher. That's a game that I literally just bought for less than 10 a few weeks back, so I didn't pick anything up there. But then I found the holy grail of vendors at this convention. This guy had walls and walls and walls of amazing retro video gaming goodness, and he didn't just have hard to find video games. He had every console, every video game for every console, and a bunch of toys and a ton of comic books. This was the vendor that I spent the most time at, and I bought a lot of stuff here. These figures are kind of cool. These are the new recent Kenner line, so they're not worth a ton, but I'm a sucker for foil covers, and these were cool to look at, although I didn't get any of those particularly. This one though, the X-Men, is from the 90s. I do have a ton of these. So these are original. They're not like new versions. This Thundercats, I think, is a modern one. This Batman one looks a bit older though, and it's in the box. He had a bunch of Pokemon plushes as well. As soon as I saw these Charmanders, I knew that I wasn't gonna leave without one. So he had several of them, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely getting one of these because I need it in my life. Don't judge me. I'm secretly 12. This one is the one I ended up getting. It's tiny and it will fit next to my Pikachu. He had a bunch of controllers and accessories as well. This transparent blue Xbox controller I already have. Otherwise, I would have picked that up. And then he had a bunch of Marvel statues as well, and some Sega Saturn accessories that I don't find in the wild too often. Specifically this Sega Saturn steering wheel, and then he's got this Green Goblin resin statue that caught my eye. And then he had like plastic bins full of old Atari games, and then hidden beneath those were just stacks of comic books. I did end up going through all, well, not all, but the vast majority of those comic books, and I picked up a few things, which we'll touch on in a bit. He also had a bunch of custom controllers here in the case, and then a copy of Secret Wars number 8, and then this beautiful Pokemon-themed Game Boy Color, which I really, really regret not getting. And then some really cool pop figures and a lizard bust. But man, this Game Boy Color, he was asking $150. I should have gotten it. I really should have, but I didn't. I might go back to get it. Now, I did find some comic books. These Devil Dinosaur books I picked up, as well as this Fantastic Four book, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But this place also apparently sells various animals like lizards and guinea pigs and mice and ferrets and all kinds of stuff that I'm pretty sure they need a license to sell. But who am I to judge? Who cares? It is what it is. The next booth I walked to, at face value, looked like they were going to have a bunch of cool stuff, but no, they just had a bunch of cell phone cases. The next booth that I stopped by had a bunch of old Barbie figures and Hot Wheels stuff, and This cool Pikachu, I love Pikachu, and then a bunch of really cool pop figures. So this is the kind of thing that I found here. So I'll close out the video by going over some of the cool things I picked up. So I picked up Secret Wars number 2, which is the first appearance of Thunder Sword in the Marvel continuity. The next comic book that I picked up is Fantastic Four number 240, which is the first appearance of Luna Maximoff. The next comic that I picked up was this Fantastic Four number 52. This is the first reprint of the first appearance of Black Panther that they ever made. The next book I picked up was X-Men number 37, all the way back from 1967. This is the first appearance of Mutant Master, and I'm super excited to have an X-Men book this old in my collection. The next two books I picked up were Devil Dinosaur books number 2 and 4. I'm trying to get the whole run of that. I think I have issues 1 through 6 at this point now. And then I picked up Morbius for the same reason. I'm trying to complete that run. That's the first solo series of Morbius from the 90s. And I have, I don't know, maybe 20 more issues before I can complete that run. The next thing I picked up is this die-cast, beautiful 40s or 50s era Chevy convertible. This thing is absolutely stunning. Everything opens up. You can see the engine, the doors open up. As I stated, I don't actively seek these out, but when I find them for cheap, which this was, I think I paid $3 for it, I pick them up. This particular one was made in Italy, and it's a 1:24 scale replica. And I love this. It looks amazing. So I picked that up. The next thing I picked up was this awesome Harry Potter collectible. This comes in a display case, and it is a Quidditch ball from Harry Potter. And this thing, you can plug it in, it lights up, and it looks really, really cool when it's lit up. Here are some pictures of what that looks like when it's lit up. And guys, I only paid $5 for that. It's really cool. Next thing I picked up was some video games, the first of which was Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64 loose. I also picked up 2 8-bit Nintendo games, DuckTales and Pinball. And I also picked up a handful of PlayStation 1 games. Rallycross was in the original case with the instruction manual, but the rest of these were loose. I got Need for Speed 3, Siphon Filter, Army Men 3D, and Warhammer Shadows of the Horned Rat. I've never heard of this one, but I'm a huge Warhammer fan, so I picked that up. I also picked up this Wii game, Angry Birds Star Wars. The only reason I picked this up is because it was sealed, factory sealed. Whenever I find factory sealed games, I will always pick those up. I also found a copy of The Suffering. This is one I've been looking for a while, and this is like a $30 game. I picked it up on the Xbox. I'm super happy to have that. It's a really great horror game. Next thing I picked up is Boba Fett. This is the Kenner line made in the early 90s, Star Wars. Awesome figure. He was asking $22, but I talked him down to $10, so that was a great deal. And then I picked up a Charmander figure, and I'm gonna put him right next to this Pikachu that I have out there. Again, don't ask me why I like the things that I like. I just do. There's probably something wrong with me, but I just needed to have this. I also picked up several PlayStation 2 games. I got Sly 2, Red Faction 2, SSX, God Hand, Metal Gear Solid 2, and XGRA Racing. God Hand, this was interesting how I ended up with a copy of this. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very expensive and rare PlayStation 2 game. And the way that I got it is I was thrift shopping and I found this copy of Gran Turismo 4 for the PlayStation 2, and it was only $5, so I picked it up, and then I got in my car and I opened it up, and Gran Turismo 4 is not the game that was inside. It was God Hand. So I got online, I found out this game sells for between $160 to like $300. It's a very expensive game. God, I don't know why anyone grades their video games, but yeah, this is a very expensive game. Anyways, these were my finds for the last 2 weeks, guys. As always, thank you for watching, and if you have any recent pickups of your own, feel free to let me know in the comments below.